So thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Patricia. The first question that we have for you is, can you tell us a little bit about the low income discount rate experience and what inspired you for this policy change?
Well, as you know, nothing seems to change. People were just overwhelmed by the high cost of energy in the state of Connecticut when I had looked at that. And then I did some research on that. Many people were put into collections, some lost their homes as a result of it. And it was just a spiral, a downward spiral. And I said, we've got to do a better job of making sure that people stay safe in their homes. So I started to look at other models, other states and what they were doing. And, as you well know, that Operation Fuel is part of a national network of fuel funds. So I started looking at my neighbors like Rhode Island and New York, and I even talked to people in New Jersey and Massachusetts, and all of them had some form of a discounted rate. And then I started to say, well, this can be this. Why can't we do this in Connecticut? Why are we the only ones who don't have a low income rate? Now, some models were better than others. Some just gave a flat discount, like they would add, take $50, $100 off the monthly bill. And I thought, okay, that may work, but it doesn't really get to the heart of the problem, the affordability factor. Mm-hmm. So I started looking at models that had percentage of income, and just started talking to the utility companies and the powers that be, and also our lobbyists, to see if they could kind of farm that out, have some conversations around the capital to see if people were open to that. Because that was, for Connecticut, that was a pretty radical move.
I'd say so.
We're the land of steady habits. Sometimes our steady habits get in our way of making sound decisions. So anyway, we did that we pitched it, we would discuss it in the Low Income Energy Advisory Committee. And finally, it looked like we had an agreement. Everything was lined up, including the utility companies. And the utility companies were concerned because, we're a deregulated state in terms of the delivery charge. They only wanted the low income rate to be passed on to the side, the usage side, and that's not that doesn't get at the problem 100%.
Right.
And so it took years to even get people to get buy-in, And so finally, we commissioned a study, Operation Fuel, to look at all the low-income rates and come up with sort of a model that would make sense for Connecticut. And unfortunately, we were close to there, and I think it was the PURA that had some concerns and decided not to go that route. They circled back to Operation Fuel and said, it's not that we just want to know where you stand on it. So that was the history of it. It was a long, meandering, multi-year approach, just getting people to hear it. I knew that if we didn't get the buy-in from the utility companies, that they would kill it with their, right out of the gate. So I wanted to have some conversations with them as well. And so unfortunately, my time at Operation Fuel ran out before we had an opportunity to even look at a model, or even, have a model for consideration. So I was surprised when it got passed.
Yeah.
Because I've been away from the organization for almost 6 years now.
Look at that. It wasn't something that was forgotten. They definitely saw the positive in requesting that change, and look where we are now. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, well,
you definitely have.
From a human sense, it makes sense, but it also makes sense from a business sense. The cost of disconnecting people and turning them back on is no small cost.
Right.
And then, how to treat people like that. So it was a win-win, I thought, on all sides.
Absolutely.
With an agreement that made sense to everybody was the challenge.
For sure. You definitely played a vital part in getting that all started. So thank you on behalf of the entire Operation Fuel for getting us here where we are.
Fuel, didn't let it drop and continued to press forward. And, now you have, I don't know how far you are in the, in terms of the implementation, But at least, there's an opportunity to create a program that makes sense for the people we serve.
I agree. All right. So can you tell us a little bit about what the process entailed as far as getting us to where you were able to get us before leaving the organization?
We had an energy subcommittee of Operation Fuel. I don't know what it was called. And it was really getting all of the major players on board and getting, and starting those conversations. It's a pretty complex issue because unlike, other nonprofits, we also have, are bound by the regulatory component. So getting the regulators on board, at least starting up those conversations, having those conversations off the books with the major utility, the utility companies, getting the legislators on board, and just getting advocates to understand. It's not an easy concept to get your head around because there's so many moving parts.
Right.
I said patience and, making sure that we had those discussions before we went public, I think was really important to getting people to think of a, discounted rate. And as I said, the major obstacle would have been utility companies. If we didn't have them at least open to a conversation, it would have been dead in the water.
Yeah, it wouldn't have gone anywhere, right?
And as you see, even with that being said, one time we came close. We got the legislator and the clock ran out on us. That was the first time, getting the legislator to agree through the Energy and Technology Committee. And then they didn't have time to pass the legislation, so we lost time on that. And then the other one, we did get the legislation passed through the state legislature, but then we had pushback from the PURA. And PURA was because they wanted to have a conversation with Operation Fuel and be clear. They weren't against the concept, but they just wanted more details.
Of course.
So it was 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It was a long, drawn-out process. I've been gone for almost 6 years. This has been, I would say, 2009 when we started.
Wow.
So it's been a long time coming.
For sure. Yeah. So why do you think the low income discount rate was needed? Why was it so critical for that to even become a thing?
Because energy, whether you're heating with gas or you're using your electricity, it's something that low-income families do not have control over. It's one of those, I call it, one of those basic human needs. It's not like I'll decide to run my car for a year or two, rather than buy a new one. I mean, and the impact it was felt on all of the state of Connecticut, but primarily on low-income people who didn't have a lot of wiggle room. I mean, I'm looking at the rates going up now.
Yeah.
And how that can mean someone losing their apartment or their home. So
Unfortunately.
And we were at that point then too, where and the cost. I mean, just to, take the humanity part out of it. It made sense to get something from people that they could afford, or have folks lose their utility and the cost around that. The dollar cost, but also the public negative costs, public publicity costs. So it was just a lot of factors all converging on one, and the fact that Connecticut had one of the highest rates for utilities in all of the continental United States. Yeah, at that time, the only exception was Hawaii.
Wow.
And while Hawaii may be a high-cost state, they don't deal with the brutal winters that Connecticut has, or even the summers, the heat without lights. And so it was just hearing the stories, using the energy affordability gap, year after year, and how people were losing ground year after year. It just made sense to try this, to try a new way of providing relief to low-income consumers in Connecticut.
Absolutely. With all that aside, is there anything else you think the public should know, or maybe you can educate us on, that plays a role in this and the importance of it?
Well, I don't think the public really understands how complex delivering energy to the state of Connecticut, particularly utilities. Connecticut still is overwhelmingly using the heat. It's deliverable fuel. Connecticut is a state that still uses deliverable fuel. And I think educating people on it's like almost like political education. I don't want to use that term, but I don't think people understand how complex when energy is, particularly gas and electricity.
Yeah.
And all of the different layers that one has to go to even get a rate. And so I think when people get angry, they lash out at the companies, but they'll also lash out at the state legislature. And so people just don't know the process. So I think it's important, without getting into the weeds and, where, your major decisions around energy, particularly utility energy, is really at Pure. You don't see folks sitting in the Pure hearing rooms. When people get frustrated, they end up at the legislature, at the mayor's office. Yeah. So I think it's just a very difficult issue to unpack and deal with. And so without organizations like Operation Fuel being able to be that intermediary for the average person, I think it would be such a hard, difficult process to get your heads around, to provide relief. I don't know if that answers your question, but even myself, before I got involved in energy assistance, and I did get involved with it because I used to be a CAP director in New Britain HRA. That's how we were one of the first Operation Fuel.
Wow.
Yes, back then. I didn't even understand the complexities. And that was one of the programs that we were in charge of.
Okay.
IHEAT program. And, that was back in the 70s. This has always been an issue. That was the creation of Operation Fuel. But they were looking at oil delivery and not really addressing, because they thought of the need for energy and was only the winter time. And they didn't even realize, even in the wintertime, you could still have a full tank of oil. And if you don't have electricity, your furnace doesn't run. So it's a very layered, complex issue to get your heads around. And I don't know how you can do that in sound bites.
Yeah.
To the public, just, where the pressure is. It would be wonderful if you could mobilize people to Pure, but your eyes glaze over when you even try to explain all of the different checkpoints and valves that you have to open and close to even get there.
Do you ever see energy burden not being an issue here in the state of Connecticut?
Well, not in my lifetime.
Okay.
I'm usually an optimist, but as I get to the end of the road, I realize that because of the kind of state we are, the 4 seasons and the volatility of our energy markets, and Connecticut is really resource poor when it comes to, we don't have natural gas.
Yeah.
We don't have oil wells in our backyard. And even generating electricity, is brought in from somewhere else. Hence why we have this problem.
Right.
With the delivery cost on electricity. So, I'm going to be 80 years old this year, so I don't really see, maybe if I live to be 100, I may.
You definitely may. We're beyond that.
Yeah. But at least we're making a good run at it. And
absolutely.
I think, as long as we constantly chip away and realize that we may not win everything, but at least whatever gains we make brings us that much closer to providing some relief to the people we serve.
Absolutely. So you do have some optimism in you. You said you usually like to be optimistic. And I know that what you just shared may have been or can be viewed as not so optimistic, but I think so. I think the fact that you can acknowledge that we've gotten somewhere compared to where we used to be, that's huge. We're moving in the right direction. And yes, it will require some baby steps, but with the help of the individuals that are making that a mission and the organizations such as Operation Fuel, I'm pretty hopeful that we can get there one day for sure.
And we will. Deregulating the whole industry needs to be looked at. So that's pretty controversial on my part to say that. I would not have said that if I were still the director of Operation Fuel. A lot of things that being retired gives me freedom to say about looking at that whole industry. These are life or death things we're talking about. We're not talking about luxury items. People cannot live without electricity. You can't burn candles. You can't. So it's really important that you keep chipping away at it. And for a low-income family, even if you get $50 relief off of your electric bill, that's $50 more that you can use for other basic needs. You can buy more food.
Yeah.
You could buy shoes for your child, so $50 may not seem a lot in the big world, but it's a lot to the low-income families that Operation Fuel serves.
I agree. Thank you for mentioning that. Well, that concludes our questions that we had for you. Is there any last words that you would like to add before we end this?
I would like to say, keep on doing what you're doing. I follow you, and I'm very proud, and I hear, and I'm at the progress you've made, and continue doing what you're doing. You're headed in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Ms. Patricia Wrice. We do appreciate your time that you have spent with us today. I know that it's been quite a journey to get us on this call together, but we made it, and I'm proud that we did. Yes, you had a lot of great things to share, and I truly am grateful. And thank you so much for.
Because you can see that sometimes I'm all over the map, but I try to give you what I could.
No, I appreciate it.
Keep up the good work. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. We appreciate all of the support. Thank you so much, Patricia.
My pleasure.